Thanks, MTS. Thanks for being here, everyone. And definitely, you can interrupt me, ask questions in the chat and Slido. My title, if you go back to the title slide. Yeah, perfect. My title is Revenue Empowerment, which is sort of a made up and important term at the same time. And so what I try to do is make sure that everyone has the knowledge they need to do their job, which is very meta, working for a knowledge management company. And so I'm sure some of you folks have heard Guru's research around a knowledge-driven culture. And so that's something that's really important to me and to Guru. And the idea there is that your knowledge is really like a company asset, like any other company asset. And we found that in a study, 94% of companies who were hitting their revenue goals also said that they were a knowledge-driven culture. To go to the next slide, that is that's wonderful, but what we've noticed and what I think culturally folks have noticed, if folks have seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, for example, give a thumbs up if you've seen or heard about this sort of idea of this attention economy. What happens when you have so much knowledge, and we're talking about knowledge and Guru, but also the different inputs we have from Slack or email or text, the way that we do our jobs, this abundance of knowledge actually creates a scarcity of attention because you cannot pay attention to really more than one thing at once. And so we're noticing that the scarcity of attention is also leading to employee burnout, which, in the world of being connected all the time and our livelihoods coming through our devices and a lot of relationships coming through our devices, really have to think about like how we structure our knowledge to help the employee experience. So we're sort of seeing the interaction or the intersection between knowledge, communication, and the employee experience, especially in like a COVID world. So if you go to the next slide, one of the ways that we're thinking about combating scarcity of attention and the abundance of knowledge is people are really craving consistency. And that is true of all humans all the time, right? We want certainty, we want routine, and especially now when we don't necessarily have a commute and that the sort of the routines that we're engaging in aren't as sort of interactive. How can we help create consistency in knowledge? So part of what I've done is worked with all of the folks here at Guru to manage what we call Guru HQ. So that's our internal knowledge base. And I've kind of worked with the team on having 3 key pillars. So if I am the DRI, so DRI, directly responsible individual, love an acronym on Guru HQ, there's no possible way that I can be the subject matter expert, SME, on all of the collections. So I have to figure out A, how to scale myself, and B, how to scale the consistency of the way that things are structured and formatted so that it helps sort of reduce that burnout and people can easier find what they're looking for in the whole world of an abundance knowledge world. So the number one thing that I have worked with the team on is creating structure, and not just structure around knowledge architecture, so how you're setting up each collection, having consistency in the web app or in naming or in tagging of the structure, but also setting up a human structure. And so you're going to hear from 3 of the wonderful humans who've worked on this project, but those are our collection champs or SMEs, and so that I can scale myself with that sort of human structure. And if there's any questions, definitely interrupt. The second sort of pillar, so I've used this metaphor of a house. So the structure of a house is sort of the scaffolding, and then the beautiful rooms inside the house are the content. And so if you think about like humans and our eyeballs, and if we're seeing different cards with the sorry, if you're seeing the same type of card with different formatting, that is going to be a larger mental load on you than having consistency of formatting. So that's really important to us. And then something we've been working on, especially in COVID years, is consistency of how we're adding knowledge to Guru. So we all know that, like, in a news cycle, newness is king. But in this case, we have to figure out how to incorporate, and a process for incorporating sort of new nuggets of knowledge and how that goes into our knowledge base and is incorporated into existing cards. Because just because a card is old doesn't mean it's incorrect. And if we think about having a million cards in a knowledge base, that's going to be that mental load and the abundance of knowledge. And happy to talk more about that. That's what we call our knowledge submissions process, offline or in the chat or anything. And then the third thing before we pass it over to champs is it's really important to have knowledge management goals for individuals, because at least for me, and like in the world, in the working world in which we live, you're not necessarily going to work on something or like volunteer to work on something if it's not in your goals. So having knowledge management as part of individual and team goals, so the consistency, the trust score, some of the knowledge input, so getting knowledge out of Slack or MS Teams into Guru, having your team goaled on that will make a big difference. So you won't be pushing a boulder uphill as much. We have a weekly stand-up, and I can drop the weekly stand-up card into the chat in a minute. But that is a place, whether people join the stand-up or not, that there's a list of sort of weekly tasks and goals that our champs and SMEs are asked to do. So every week looking at duplicate detection, or searching for, or looking at the analytics on searches producing no results. And so there's a lot of little things you can incorporate habitually into a routine to make sure that your knowledge is consistent. And then lastly, like the sort of celebration and honoring champs makes this not a nice to have, but part of a knowledge-driven culture. And celebrating our champs is something that we're doing here. So I'm gonna, unless there's any questions, and I'll pause, I'm gonna pass it over to one of our champs of the marketing collection, Emily.